Stop trying to impress everyone. That habit will wear your spirit thin, like a well-loved dress pulled too often from the closet, stitched and mended until the fabric forgets its own strength. From the time you first learned to walk, the world began teaching you how to perform. Smile when spoken to. Sit straight. Say the right thing. Become the version of yourself that makes other people comfortable. Over time, you may have learned to measure your worth by applause, approval, and nodding heads. But a life spent chasing approval is a life lived on borrowed breath. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from constantly adjusting yourself to fit into rooms that were never built with your shape in mind. You laugh when you do not feel amused. You agree when your heart is shaking its head. You shrink when your soul wants to stand tall. You become fluent in reading the moods of others, while growing illiterate in the language of your own needs. This kind of living may look polite on the outside, but inside it leaves you hollow, waiting for permission to exist as you truly are. The truth is simple and stubborn: you cannot impress everyone. No matter how kind you are, someone will call you weak. No matter how strong you are, someone will call you cold. If you speak your truth, you will be called difficult. If you stay silent, you will be called invisible. The world is crowded with opinions, and most of them have nothing to do with who you really are. They are reflections of other people's fears, expectations, and unfinished business. Carrying them all will bend your back and blur your vision. When you focus your life on impressing others, you give them the steering wheel to your destiny. You let their moods decide your confidence, their praise decide your value, their criticism decide your limits. One good word can lift you high, and one careless remark can drop you to your knees. That is not freedom. That is captivity dressed up as courtesy. A person who depends on external approval is always one comment away from collapse. There is a deeper work waiting for you, and it begins the moment you turn your attention inward. Focusing on yourself is not selfishness, it is self-respect. It is the decision to know your own mind, to listen to your own body, to honor your own truth even when it makes the room uncomfortable. It is choosing to ask yourself, what do I need to live honestly? Instead of, what do they need me to be so they will accept me? You were not born to be a performance. You were born to be a presence. There is a difference. A performance depends on an audience. A presence stands firm even when the room is empty. When you focus on yourself, you begin to cultivate that presence. You learn how to sit with your own thoughts without rushing to decorate them for others. You learn how to say no without apology and yes without fear. You learn that peace is a better companion than popularity. There will be people who resist this change in you. They were comfortable with the version of you that bent easily, that explained too much, that carried the weight of their expectations without complaint. When you stop trying to impress them, they may accuse you of changing, and they will be right. You are changing from someone who survives on approval to someone who lives on truth. Growth often looks like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. Focusing on yourself requires courage because it means standing alone at times. It means trusting your inner compass even when no one is clapping. It means understanding that loneliness is not always a sign of failure. Sometimes it is evidence of integrity. When you refuse to betray yourself for acceptance, you may lose some company, but you gain something far more valuable: your own respect. And once you have that, you are no longer for sale. You do not need to announce this shift to the world. You do not need to explain your healing, your boundaries, or your dreams to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Let your life speak. Let your calm speak. Let your consistency speak. Those who are meant to walk with you will hear the language of your authenticity and recognize it as familiar. Those who cannot will fade into the background noise where they belong. When you focus on yourself, you begin to notice how much energy you have been giving away. Hours spent worrying about what someone thought of you. Days spent replaying conversations, editing your words after they were already spoken. Years spent delaying your own dreams because someone might disapprove. Imagine what could grow if you redirected that energy inward. Imagine the strength you would build if you invested in your own development with the same intensity you once invested in pleasing others. Your mind becomes clearer when it is no longer cluttered with imagined judgments. Your heart becomes lighter when it is no longer burdened by the need to be liked. Your decisions become stronger when they are rooted in values instead of validation. You begin to choose paths that nourish you, not paths that merely impress an audience. And slowly, almost quietly, your life begins to feel like it belongs to you. There is a particular dignity that comes from knowing who you are. It does not shout. It does not beg. It does not rush to defend itself. It stands still and lets the truth settle. This dignity grows when you honor your own limits, when you rest without guilt, when you change your mind without shame, when you admit you do not know and still trust that you are enough. This dignity cannot be given by others, and it cannot be taken away by their opinions. You may have been taught that being loved requires being agreeable, that success requires being admired, that safety requires blending in. But real love recognizes you even when you stand out. Real success feels like alignment, not exhaustion. Real safety comes from trusting yourself, not from hiding behind masks. When you focus on yourself, you begin to unlearn the lie that you must earn the right to exist as you are. There will be moments when old habits call you back. A critical look, a raised eyebrow, a silence that feels like rejection. In those moments, you may feel the familiar urge to explain, to soften yourself, to perform. Pause, breathe. Remember how far you have come. Remember that you are not responsible for managing other people's comfort at the expense of your own truth. Let the discomfort pass without surrendering your integrity. As you continue this work, you will discover that focusing on yourself sharpens your compassion rather than dulling it. When you stop trying to impress, you stop competing. When you stop competing, you stop comparing. When you stop comparing, you begin to see others more clearly, without envy or resentment. You can appreciate their light without dimming your own. You can support their journey without abandoning yours. Your voice will change, not in volume but in authority. You will speak less to persuade and more to express. You will listen not to agree, but to understand. You will walk into rooms without scanning for approval, because you will already be standing on solid ground within yourself. This is not arrogance. This is rootedness. A tree does not apologize for taking up space. It grows where it is planted and trusts the sun to find it. Focusing on yourself also means forgiving yourself for the years you spent trying to be everything for everyone. You did what you knew how to do to survive, to belong, to be safe. Thank that version of yourself for its effort, then gently release it. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow old roles. You are allowed to choose a life that feels honest instead of impressive. In time, you will notice a subtle shift in your relationships. Some will deepen, built now on mutual respect rather than performance. Others will loosen, their purpose fulfilled. Do not cling to what no longer fits. Trust that making space is an act of faith. What is meant for you will meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. The greatest impression you can make is not on others, but on your own soul. When you lay your head down at night, let it rest on the knowledge that you lived in alignment with yourself that day, that you spoke when it mattered, that you stayed silent when it was wise, that you honored your energy, that you chose growth over approval. That kind of peace does not fade when the lights go out. So stop trying to impress everyone. The world does not need another carefully curated performance. It needs your honesty, your steadiness, your lived truth. Focus on yourself not as an escape from responsibility, but as a return to authenticity. Tend to your inner life with patience and courage. Stand in who you are with humility and strength, and let the rest fall where it may, knowing that a life rooted in self-respect will always stand taller than one built on applause. When you stop performing, you start living. That truth does not arrive with noise or celebration. It enters quietly, like a breath you did not realize you were holding finally being released. Performing becomes a habit long before you notice it. You learn early how to adjust your tone, your smile, your opinions, your silence. You learn which parts of yourself are welcomed and which parts make others uneasy. So you edit, soften, rehearse. Over time, you forget where the performance ends and where you begin. Performance is exhausting because it requires constant awareness of the audience. You are always watching faces, measuring reactions, anticipating judgment. You laugh a second longer than you feel. You agree even when your spirit resists. You explain yourself too much, hoping clarity will earn acceptance. Living like this keeps you busy, but it keeps you distant from yourself. You exist, but you are not present. The moment you stop performing, something shifts inside. Your shoulders lower. Your breath deepens. You realize how much energy you were spending just to be tolerated. You begin to hear your own thoughts again, not the echo of what you think others want to hear. Silence stops being threatening and starts becoming a place of rest. You no longer feel the need to fill every gap with proof of your worth. Stopping the performance does not mean becoming careless or unkind. It means becoming honest. It means letting your responses come from truth instead of strategy. It means understanding that your value does not increase when you are admired, and it does not disappear when you are misunderstood. You begin to speak because something matters to you, not because you are afraid of how silence might be interpreted. Living begins when your actions align with your inner voice, when what you say matches what you feel, when your yes is real and your no is clean. At first, this alignment can feel uncomfortable because you are no longer hiding behind roles that once protected you. You may feel exposed, uncertain, even vulnerable. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to a life that feels real. When you stop performing, some people will feel unsettled. They were familiar with the version of you that adjusted itself for their comfort. They may question your change, resist it, or attempt to pull you back into old patterns. Not because you are wrong, but because your authenticity disrupts the unspoken agreements they relied on. Living truthfully often challenges others to look at their own masks. There is freedom in no longer rehearsing your personality. You no longer enter rooms with a script. You listen without planning your response. You speak without calculating the outcome. You allow pauses. You allow imperfection. You allow yourself to be human instead of impressive. This freedom brings clarity, and clarity brings peace. Living means accepting that not everyone will understand you, and realizing that understanding is not a requirement for self-respect. It means choosing inner steadiness over external validation. It means trusting that the people who truly belong in your life will recognize you without you having to perform for them. As you release the need to perform, your relationships begin to change. Conversations deepen or fade. Connections either strengthen through honesty or dissolve through misalignment. This is not loss, it is refinement. You stop surrounding yourself with people who only know your mask, and you make space for those who can meet your truth without fear. Living also means allowing yourself to grow without explanation. You do not owe the world a justification for your healing. You do not need permission to evolve. The person you were while surviving is not required to be the person you remain while becoming whole. Growth does not announce itself. It reveals itself through changed choices and calmer reactions. When you stop performing, you stop chasing approval. You no longer measure your days by how liked you were or how useful you seemed. You begin to measure them by how aligned you felt, how honest you were, how gently you treated yourself. Success takes on a different meaning. It becomes less about recognition and more about inner balance. Living is quieter than performing, but it is richer. It allows you to experience joy without showcasing it, pain without disguising it, and peace without defending it. You learn that your worth is not something you prove. It is something you protect. You become less reactive because you are no longer living on display. In this space, creativity returns. Curiosity returns. Rest returns. You begin to notice what actually nourishes you and what merely drains you. You make decisions that support your well-being instead of your image. You choose environments that allow you to breathe. You give your energy to what feels meaningful rather than what looks impressive. When you stop performing, you start listening to your body. You notice when you are tired, when you are overwhelmed, when you need distance. You stop forcing yourself to endure what hurts just to maintain appearances. You begin to understand that endurance without purpose is not strength, it is neglect. Living requires courage because it asks you to stand without applause. It asks you to trust yourself even when there is no immediate reward. But the reward comes quietly, steadily, in the form of self-trust. And self-trust changes everything. It changes how you move through the world, how you respond to conflict, how you handle disappointment. You no longer abandon yourself to keep the peace. You no longer betray your truth to avoid tension. You realize that peace built on silence is fragile, but peace built on honesty can withstand discomfort. You stop apologizing for existing fully. When you stop performing, your life begins to feel like it belongs to you. Your choices reflect your values. Your time reflects your priorities. Your voice reflects your inner clarity. You begin to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in, and that shift changes the way every moment feels. Growth begins where people-pleasing ends, and that ending is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive with a loud declaration or a public stand. It often begins quietly, with a moment of discomfort you no longer ignore. A pause before saying yes when your body wants to say no. A tightening in the chest that finally gets your attention. People-pleasing is learned early, taught subtly as survival, praised as kindness, rewarded as maturity. You learn that being agreeable keeps you safe, that being easy to deal with earns love, that putting yourself last avoids conflict. Over time, pleasing others becomes automatic. You anticipate needs before they are spoken. You adjust your opinions to match the room. You minimize your pain so others don't feel inconvenienced. You pride yourself on being understanding, flexible, low maintenance. But beneath that surface lives a quiet resentment, not toward others, but toward yourself for constantly disappearing. Growth cannot take root in a space where you are always abandoning yourself. People-pleasing keeps you busy but stagnant. You are always reacting, rarely choosing. Your decisions are shaped by fear of disappointing, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. You confuse harmony with self-erasure. You believe your value comes from how useful, accommodating, or reliable you are to others. This belief keeps you small because growth demands friction, and people-pleasing avoids it at all costs. The end of people-pleasing often feels like loss. You may lose approval. You may lose roles that once defined you. You may lose the illusion of control that comes from managing how others see you. But what you gain is space, and space is where growth breathes. In that space, you begin to hear yourself clearly, sometimes for the first time. Your preferences stop whispering. Your boundaries stop apologizing. Ending people-pleasing does not mean becoming harsh or indifferent. It means becoming honest. It means recognizing that kindness without self-respect turns into self-betrayal. True generosity is a choice, not a compulsion. When you give because you want to, not because you are afraid, your actions carry integrity instead of exhaustion. Growth asks you to tolerate discomfort. The discomfort of someone being unhappy with you. The discomfort of not explaining yourself. The discomfort of letting silence exist where you once rushed to fix things. These moments test your nervous system, not your character. You are not wrong for feeling uneasy when you stop pleasing. You are unlearning a pattern that once kept you safe. As people-pleasing ends, your relationships change. Some people will push back. They were attached to the version of you that always adjusted, always said yes, always made things easier for them. Your growth may feel like rejection to them, even though it is simply self-respect. Others will adapt, meeting you where you are, relieved by your honesty, strengthened by your boundaries. Growth clarifies who is connected to you and who is connected to your compliance. You begin to notice how often you were choosing peace for others at the cost of peace within yourself. You learn that conflict avoided does not disappear. It settles inside the body as tension, fatigue, and self-doubt. When you stop people-pleasing, you allow conflict to exist without letting it define you. You learn that discomfort can be survived and that clarity is worth the risk. Growth also changes how you see yourself. You stop measuring your worth by how liked you are. You stop over-functioning to feel needed. You begin to respect your own limits. Rest stops feeling like laziness and starts feeling like wisdom. Saying no stops feeling selfish and starts feeling necessary. You realize that being disappointed in yourself hurts far more than disappointing others. Ending people-pleasing reveals parts of you that were hidden under politeness. Anger that was swallowed. Desires that were postponed. Dreams that were labeled impractical because they did not fit someone else's expectations. Growth requires you to sit with these truths without rushing to judge them. You are allowed to want what you want. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that survived by being agreeable. As growth takes hold, your voice steadies. You speak with less urgency, less defense. You no longer feel the need to convince everyone. You understand that being misunderstood is not a failure. It is often the cost of being real. You choose clarity over comfort, alignment over approval. Your decisions become slower but stronger. People-pleasing ends when you stop negotiating your worth. When you stop explaining why your feelings make sense. When you stop waiting for permission to take up space. Growth begins when you trust yourself enough to stand by your choices, even when they are not celebrated. This trust is built through practice, through small acts of self-honesty repeated daily. You begin to notice how much lighter life feels when you are not constantly monitoring reactions. Your energy returns. Your creativity returns. You laugh more freely, not because you are trying to be liked, but because joy is present. You feel sadness without hiding it. You feel confidence without needing validation. Growth makes room for the full range of your humanity. Ending people-pleasing does not isolate you, it aligns you. You attract relationships rooted in mutual respect rather than obligation. You connect with people who appreciate your truth instead of your sacrifices. Growth teaches you that love does not require self-abandonment, and belonging does not require performance. The more you grow, the less you feel responsible for managing other people's emotions. You understand that everyone is accountable for their own reactions. You stop carrying guilt that was never yours. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stand in your values even when your voice shakes. Growth continues as long as you continue choosing yourself without cruelty and others without self-erasure. It deepens each time you listen to your inner signals instead of overriding them. It strengthens each time you honor your boundaries without apology. The end of people-pleasing is not the end of care for others. It is the beginning of care that includes you. Choose alignment over admiration, because admiration is a sound that fades quickly, while alignment is a feeling that stays with you when the room goes quiet. From an early age, many people learn to chase approval without realizing it. A smile from authority, praise from elders, recognition from peers becomes proof that you are doing life correctly. Slowly, admiration becomes a compass, guiding your choices, shaping your behavior, teaching you to value how you are seen more than how you feel. Admiration is seductive because it feels like love, but it is conditional. It arrives when you perform well, when you say the right thing, when you fit the image others have in mind. It leaves just as easily when you disappoint, disagree, or change. Living for admiration keeps you alert but anxious, confident only when affirmed, uncertain the moment silence appears. You begin to curate yourself, polishing edges, hiding doubts, presenting a version that earns applause even if it costs you peace. Alignment asks something very different of you. It asks you to listen inward instead of outward. It asks you to notice what feels true, what feels forced, what feels draining, what feels alive. Alignment does not guarantee praise. In fact, it often invites misunderstanding. But alignment offers something admiration never can: inner steadiness. When your actions match your values, you no longer need constant reassurance. You know where you stand, even if others do not. Choosing alignment means making decisions that feel right in your body, not just impressive on paper. It means walking away from paths that look successful but feel empty. It means saying yes to things that nourish you even if they do not elevate your status. This choice can be uncomfortable, especially in a world that celebrates visibility more than integrity. But discomfort is often the first sign that you are stepping out of performance and into truth. Admiration encourages comparison. You measure yourself against others, wondering who is ahead, who is behind, who is watching. Alignment dissolves comparison because it roots you in your own lane. You no longer need to outrun anyone or impress anyone. Your only responsibility is to remain honest with yourself. Progress becomes personal instead of public. Growth becomes internal instead of performative. When you choose admiration, you may find yourself agreeing to things that do not suit you, staying in places that drain you, pursuing goals that do not belong to you. You may become skilled at appearing confident while feeling disconnected inside. Alignment interrupts this pattern. It asks you to slow down, to question motives, to distinguish between what excites you and what flatters you. Over time, this clarity changes the quality of your life. Alignment does not make you immune to doubt. You will still question yourself. You will still feel fear. But the fear is different. It is not the fear of losing approval. It is the fear of stepping into responsibility for your own life. This fear carries growth within it. Admiration-based fear keeps you small. Alignment-based fear stretches you forward. People may not always celebrate your aligned choices. Some will be confused by them. Others may feel threatened when you stop chasing validation they once provided. Choosing alignment can shift dynamics, especially with those who benefited from your need to be liked. This does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are no longer negotiating your worth. Alignment teaches you to trust your inner signals. When something feels off, you listen. When something feels right, you honor it. You stop overriding yourself to maintain an image. You stop explaining your intuition to people who do not need to understand it. This trust builds slowly through repeated acts of self-honesty. Each time you choose alignment, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Admiration is external and unstable. It depends on trends, opinions, moods. Alignment is internal and grounded. It remains even when circumstances change. When life becomes uncertain, alignment becomes an anchor. You may not know what will happen next, but you know who you are and what you stand for. That knowledge becomes a source of calm. Choosing alignment also reshapes success. Success is no longer defined by applause, titles, or recognition. It is defined by how congruent your life feels. by how often you feel at peace with your choices, by how rarely you abandon yourself. This kind of success may look quieter, but it feels fuller. It allows you to rest without guilt and work without resentment. Alignment requires boundaries. You cannot stay aligned if you say yes to everything. You cannot stay aligned if you ignore your limits. Admiration often rewards overextension. Alignment respects sustainability. It reminds you that burnout is not a badge of honor, and self-neglect is not devotion. Choosing alignment means choosing longevity over urgency. As you live in alignment, your confidence changes. It becomes less reactive. You are not lifted by praise or crushed by criticism. Feedback becomes information instead of identity. You listen without absorbing what does not belong to you. This steadiness makes you less controllable and more authentic. Alignment also deepens your compassion. When you are no longer competing for admiration, you stop seeing others as threats. You can celebrate their success without diminishing your own. You can support without comparison. You can listen without needing to impress. Relationships become more genuine because they are no longer filtered through performance. Choosing alignment is an ongoing practice, not a one-time decision. Each day presents small moments where you choose between what looks good and what feels right. Each choice reinforces a pattern. Over time, those patterns become a life that reflects your values instead of others' expectations. A life that feels coherent rather than scattered. There will be moments when admiration tempts you again, an opportunity that flatters but compromises you, a role that elevates your image but silences your voice. In those moments, alignment asks you to pause and remember what matters. It asks you to consider the long-term cost of short-term praise. Alignment allows you to show up whole. You do not have to split yourself into acceptable and hidden parts. You do not have to pretend to be unaffected or endlessly capable. You can be honest about your limits, your needs, your uncertainty. This honesty creates trust, both within yourself and with others who value truth over illusion. Choosing alignment over admiration is a quiet revolution. It changes how you move, how you speak, how you decide. It may not make you famous, but it makes you free. It may not make you popular, but it makes you peaceful. And in a world that constantly pulls you outward, choosing alignment brings you back to yourself again and again with a growing sense of clarity, strength, and belonging within your own life